So I didn't review the first season of his Dark Materials. I wasn't doing this channel at that point. But I really enjoyed it. I particularly enjoyed the final episode. I felt like the dramatic ending was quite strong. It's just a top notch production from top to bottom. But I would have to admit, I was a little bit disappointed by this season opener. And it's not that it was bad per se, I just didn't feel like there was quite enough going on. It was very much a setup episode, which, doesn't have to be a bad thing. But to me, I was just hoping for a little bit more, to feel a little bit more pumped. Now, I read the books that this is based on. This was easily my least favorite book. They've done some things, I think, to kind of soften the weaknesses of the book. For me, a major source of disappointment when I read that book was that I really liked Lyra. I really liked the strength of her character in the first book, and I liked the representation that the actress Dafne Keen brought to the character in the first season. And I was a little bit concerned because in the book there's really this shift of focus because they stop telling the story from the third person perspective of Lyra and they shift over to Will. And I found him to be a rather generic protagonist compared to Lyra and just not that compelling or interesting. And in the book, he kind of just usurps Lyra's role as the chief protagonist, not just for the second book, but for the third book as well. So to me, I found that kind of a frustrating decision. And here in the show, they've made the wise decision to get a lot of the backstory for Will's character out of the way last season so that they could just hit the ground running this season and not have to unpack as much with him. And because it's a TV show, there's not really a perspective per se. Like a scene can play from multiple perspectives, which usually I find that scenes are stronger in television and in film when they do have a perspective. But I think in terms of this story, I'm glad that it hasn't suddenly shifted to Will's perspective in the scenes with him and Lyra, that the characters are getting to show, equal amounts of resourcefulness and personality. And I do think these actors have great chemistry. I think that Amir Wilson was a great casting choice. So I'm interested to see their relationship develop. I think that the scenes between them were the strongest aspect of this opener. I also liked the change of setting. I think that it's very reminiscent to me of Game of Thrones. It reminded me of a lot of the cities we saw in that show. And obviously we saw an appearance by Bella Ramsey, who was in Game of Thrones as Lyanna Mormont. If you were recognizing the face but not remembering where you had seen her, that's who she is. A small role here, doesn't really make a huge impression to me. She's one of those actresses that was just really phenomenally well cast in Game of Thrones, but I don't imagine she's going to have a particularly long and successful career otherwise. But here, good use of her just in a brief role. I feel that the specters are interesting. It would have been nice to have a little bit more of them this episode. They're one of the many elements of this show that make it a little bit dubious as a family show. But the author of this book was very much of the mindset that kids could handle a lot of dark elements, as we saw at the end of last season. So there's definitely a lot of that here. The specter that appears behind Will at the end of the episode was quite freaky looking, and it'll be interesting to see how they incorporate those. I'm sure if you were watching this with your kids that was probably very frightening for them and probably pretty exciting too. We also got to see some scenes with Mrs. Coulter this episode. She's making some Machiavellian power plays with Father MacPhail as they conspire to kill the cardinal together. And we get a surprising amount of torture scenes for a show targeted ostensibly at a family audience. And my big question, I really appreciate Ruth Wilson in this role. I think that her acting, the way that her actions kind of mirror the posturing and the way that her demon moves is very, very well done. And I think that it's very, very convincing. You can see the connection between her and her demon, just really, really well represented. And it's not very flattering to an actress to be acting like a chimp. But she goes for it, and she does it quite well. And I think that it adds to this sense of the bestial in her that and makes her capable of these terrible acts, such as torturing this witch, Katya. But I did think the scene where Ruta Scotty showed up and Mercy killed Katya was pretty dumb, honestly, because she shows up, she stabs a bunch of people, she Mercy kills Katya, but she left Mrs. Coulter alive. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It really feels like one of those TV writing decisions where you want there to be kind of a confrontation between characters, but you don't actually want either of the major players to be taken out just yet. So that to me seemed kind of sloppy and unconvincing. But overall, this first episode, City of Magpies, like I said, it was a table setting episode, and it didn't diminish my enthusiasm for this show or make me think that this isn't going to be a good season. I think that there's definitely going to be some really good episodes this season, and some moments that are going to delight viewers and some moments that are going to be very sad and shocking for viewers. So I'm looking forward to all of that. I think that, episode counts are always tricky. Some shows manage to fill 13 episodes really well. Some shows struggle to fill 8. And to me, I just think that there's just not enough plot for the episode count that His Dark Materials has. That's just my opinion. I feel like it doesn't have quite enough plot to carry it all the way through. There just wasn't enough going on this episode. I think they should have moved things forward a little bit further. Maybe not had 8 episodes, had 6 episodes. But those are just my thoughts for what they're worth. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing so you can see my other reviews of upcoming shows and movies. Thanks for watching, and if you give me a like, I'd really appreciate it.